Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the Excalibur Omnibus because it's X-Men time. We're gonna read some X-Men books. Okay, well maybe not X-Men, but Excalibur, their weird British cousin. Excalibur is the third X-Men team spin-off from the original X-Men series. The first two team series to spin off from X-Men are the New Mutants and X-Factor. As far as companion titles go to X-Men, Excalibur is one of the most unique titles there are. Before Excalibur, the multiverse was pretty limited to What If comics, a few runs on X-Men, a few runs on Fantastic Four, and some Avengers. Excalibur basically brought the whole multiverse into the main continuity's relevance. So I do want to do a table-side review of this comic book, but I also want to give some recommendation and some honorable mentions. So this is an X-Men spin-off, so my first recommendation is going to be 100% reading Chris Claremont's entire run of X-Men. What I have here is the Essential X-Men collection. Essentials were a line of reprints that were produced on newspaper print. The lightweight and grayscale or black and white art made it much more affordable to reprint entire collections for a low cost. Unfortunately, right now, Essentials are hard to come by, and their sister series, the Epic Collections, are even harder to come by after they're out of print. Other ways you can collect this entire series is the Marvel Omnibus or Masterworks. Basically, everything you know about the X-Men comes from Chris Claremont. We've got the Dark Phoenix Saga, The Brood, Mutant Massacre, Days of Future Past, The Shire Empire, Inferno, Extinction. This run leads right into the 90s, one of the most iconic eras for the X-Men. So I know we're all big boy comic book readers here, so reading an entire run like this may not be feasible. That said, I do have some recommendations I'm going to give you. My first recommendation is the lead up to this omnibus, the Inferno Saga. Inferno was a crossover in the X-Men that took place around the late 80s. It was a transition era for the X-Men where the public thought the X-Men died in a huge battle. The ramifications of that event actually affects the entire Marvel Universe, and if you're interested in seeing what happens with the entire Marvel Universe, X-Men does have an Inferno crossover tough paperback. This is a recent print, so you should still be able to get it. My next recommendation is where it all started, Giant Size X-Men. Recently, they came out with a tribute issue to Lin Win and Dave Cockrum. You get the classic script with a new feel. So Giant Size X-Men, a tribute, should still be in comic book stores or online for a decent price. My second recommendation is God Loves, Man Kills. You could read this in multiple editions, but the most recent edition was an expanded edition. The expanded edition that just came out is booked in by Chris Claremont. Kitty Pryde is a character that's featured in those bookends and the main story. God Loves, Man Kills is one of the most iconic X-Men reads out there. When it came out, it showed how mature comic books could be, and its themes are even relevant today in our current politics. So God Loves, Man Kills, a dark read, but definitely one that every X-Men fan either already knows or should read. My next recommendation is a paperback called Captain Britain, Legacy of a Legend. This is a compilation book by Chris Claremont, Alan Davis, and Alan Moore. What it does is it highlights the origin and mythos of Captain Britain. This doesn't contain a complete run, but it does have all the highlights and major plot points for Captain Britain leading up to this omnibus. My next recommendation is the Nightcrawler miniseries from 1985. This is a 4-issue miniseries. This has Alan Davis on plot and art, and it's Nightcrawler's first solo adventure. Now my next ones are honorable mentions. In the mid-2000s, Chris Claremont did do a stint on X-Men. Unfortunately for Chris Claremont, it was a time where Ed Brubaker, Grant Morrison, and Joss Whedon took center stage in the X-Men titles. Not to say his X-Men titles weren't good, they just were overshadowed by the more popular writers of the time. In this House of M crossover, we get to follow up on an alternate universe version of the Excalibur. This Excalibur exists in a world where Magneto is the king of basically everything, and it kind of deals with them being a different type of X-Men. A lot of elements in this omnibus are touched on in this alternate universe story. This story isn't in print currently, but a used copy usually doesn't go for that much. My second honorable mention is the Excalibur comic book series that spins directly out of the events of the Grant Morrison New X-Men series. In the New X-Men, the island of Genosha, known for having mostly mutant inhabitants, was destroyed by a terrorist attack. This comic book series, written by Chris Claremont, has a lot of the similar themes of God Loves, Man Kills, but it has little to do with the characters or the events dealt with in the Excalibur Omnibus. This is a heavier read, so if you like the darker Chris Claremont stuff, this is definitely for you. And last but not least, New Excalibur. This was a follow-up about 2 decades after Chris Claremont completed his run on Excalibur. So what this series does is it rejoins the cast and characters from the original Excalibur run. They get into new hijinks, new problems, a lot of alternate Earth stuff that's a theme with these comic books, and new and existing characters join the fray. This is one of those unfortunately underrated comic book series just because of the timing. So at the time, you had to be a fan who has deep X-Men knowledge to really appreciate all the threads and storylines in this book. That's a wrap on my recommendations. Let's pop this book open. Alright, what we've got here is the direct market version of the cover. If you're newer to Omnibus, a direct market variant is usually a cover that's based off of an existing cover of a comic book run. The traditional Omnibus cover is usually a recolored or a completely new piece of artwork. A lot of people like direct market because it just pays homage to the original artist. Here's a look at that spine. We got the traditional Marvel spine on it. It is Excalibur Volume 1. There is not a solicitation for Volume 2 as of yet, but all of Chris Claremont's run from the original series is in this omnibus. Another thing that the Marvel Omnibus like to do is they thumbnail all the covers that are contained within the omnibus. This omnibus contains Excalibur Special Edition number 1, Excalibur 1 through 34, Excalibur Mojo Mayhem, Quasar 11, Thor 427 through 429. It also contains the backup features of Marvel Comics Presents 31 through 38. So let's open up the dust jacket and see what's under it. Oh, cool. So we've got a wraparound cover showing the entire team. If you're not familiar with the team, I'll give you some rundowns real quick. Nightcrawler, he teleports. Shadowcat, she phases between material. Captain Britain, basically a mutant super soldier with some magic capabilities. The second Phoenix, Rachel Summer, her powers are similar to Jean Grey's. Jean Grey is her mother. And then we have Megan, an interdimensional magical being from a different realm. So like I said in the recommendation portion of this video, this comic book series takes place directly after Inferno. Absent from Inferno was Kitty Pryde. She sustained some injuries that caused her not to be active. This series picks up with her a little confused about what happened with the X-Men. At the time of the first issue of Excalibur, the X-Men are declared dead. In reality, they're living in Australia under the radar. But because of the events of Inferno, everyone thinks they died saving New York City. If you don't know who Rachel Summers is, she is the Phoenix's daughter and Scott Summers' daughter. She first appeared in the Days of Future Past storyline. In that storyline, her and an adult Kitty Pryde were leaders in a resistance against the humans. The humans had put a bunch of mutants in concentration camps. In the Days of Future Past, basically everything bad that could happen to mutants does happen. There is a story with Mojo that kind of plays tribute to the Days of Future Past. In this story, Kitty Pryde needs to save the X-Babies. If you think I was kidding, it's literally X-Men babies. This story gets really weird at times. Kitty Pryde helps save the X-Babies from Mojo, a TV producer from space. Very bizarre stuff. A majority of this omnibus is a story called the Crosstime Caper. The Crosstime Caper is about the team taking on interdimensional adversaries. Think What If or DC's Elseworld comics. It serializes their adventures through the entire multiverse. So a lot of this dimension hopping story is pretty goofy and just fun. There are some serious elements to it. For example, there's one story arc where Rachel has to go back in time and confront a representation of her mother. So Chris Claremont really gets to play with his own toys here. So this series ran side by side with the X-Men title that Claremont was also writing, but it has little to no crossover with it. A lot of the stuff that happens here is self-contained, but that doesn't mean it isn't touched on in later comic books. So also collected here are some issues from Marvel Comics Presents. That was an anthology series that had about 8 pages dedicated to one character or one superhero group, and each storyline ran for about 6 issues. This is another one of those goofy stories where they take on analogs for the Looney Tunes. It's kind of like Crosstime Caper, but a condensed version of it. When Marvel Comics Presents came out, you didn't have to read the actual ongoing title to really understand what was happening in the anthology series. But it is nice that they collect that in this omnibus as well. The omnibus wraps up with a few tie-in issues from Quasar and Thor. These issues pretty much just highlight Excalibur's interaction with other Marvel comic book characters. Excalibur deals with so much in the abstract that sometimes you forget that they are part of the Marvel Universe. These issues might be added in just to remind you that everything that did happen technically did happen in continuity. But people who collect Omnibus are also completists, so I'm definitely glad they kept them in. The end of the Omnibus has some Marvel Age editorials. followed by previously used artwork used in ads or on the old trade paperbacks. And then we have some character dossiers. I also included some of the original pages without the coloring, which is kind of cool to look at, just to highlight Alan Davis's artwork a little bit. So before we wrap up, let's take a look at the eye. Here's the spine. Really tight, really sturdy. Marvel has definitely improved over the last few years. Gutter loss from the center of the book is almost non-existent. And the pages even hold open towards the end, which is pretty impressive for an over 1,000-page book. So there you have it, the Excalibur Omnibus #1. Before I let you all go, I do have a request though. Let me know in the comment section which Omni you want me to go over next. I've got the Batman Scott Snyder Grey Capullo Omnibus and the Wolverine Omnibus #1. Both of these stories are groundbreaking and epic, but I want to know what you guys want to see next on the channel. So hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comment section which one of these you want to see me go over next. I want to thank you guys for watching again, and now it's time to get off the Omnibus. Peace.